In today's video, we're going to be continuing on our 2019 off-season report series, and we're focusing today on the Montreal Canadiens, and that's coming up next. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. If you're new to the channel, thanks for stopping by. We review and discuss all 31 NHL teams, so if you're a huge hockey fan, consider subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. So as I mentioned, today we're carrying on the 2019 off-season plan report, and we're talking about the Montreal Canadiens. This is video number 6 of 31, so stay tuned for the rest to come. If I haven't covered your team yet, I will be doing so here very soon in the next coming days and weeks, so please stay tuned for the remainder of this series to come here. Now, of course, if you haven't caught the other previous 5 videos in this series, I'll put a link to a playlist up here so you can catch those after this one. In case you're new to this series as well, basically we're going to break this down into a couple different segments. The first one, we're going to do a recap of the 18-19 season, where we take a look at how the team, as well as some key individuals, perform throughout the year. Secondly, we're going to take a look at their overall cap situation, any pending contracts they have to look after, like RFAs, UFAs, or any key players that might be looking for an extension. So we'll analyze that, and then we're going to take a look at some of the key things they need to do during the offseason to get better and be more prepared for next year. So let's dive in here with an 18-19 season recap. So the Montreal Canadiens finished with a record of 44-30-8 for 96 points, 4th best in the Atlantic Division, just barely missing the playoffs as a wildcard team. Unfortunately, they were too far behind teams like Tampa, Boston, and Toronto to catch the top 3, and they just barely missed the wildcard. Unfortunately, the end of the year wasn't real kind to them, and they ended up missing out, allowing teams like Columbus and Carolina to cement positions ahead of them. Overall, I must say this is a pretty well improved team year over year from the year before. Obviously, the year before was a lot lower in the standings. Certainly had a lot more things going on. They made some big trades during last offseason, including trading captain Max Pacioretty to Vegas. So obviously, this team is a fair bit different and a fair bit improved, you could certainly say. Now, let's take a look at some of their team stats from the year. Get starting here with special teams. The power play was actually not really good at all. This is one of the main areas of weakness for this team this year. They only had a 13.2% power play for 30th best in the NHL, only better than the Nashville Predators. The penalty kill was pretty decent and respectable at 80.9% for 13th best. For goals for, they scored 249 goals for 13th best, and goals against was 236 for 12th best. So really, in those other areas outside of the power play, they were certainly better than average and certainly strong enough in those respects at least to likely be a playoff team here. Now let's take a look at some individual statistics, including their starting goaltender and some of their top scorers from this past year. Now, of course, Carey Price had a pretty solid rebound year. This is probably the best solid season we've seen of him in the last couple of years, where he finished with a 35-24-6 record, a 2.49 goals against average, and a .918 save percentage. So Carey Price was pretty much back to being Carey Price. I mean, we have seen him perform even better, but of course the team in front of him certainly plays a role in that as well. But it's certainly, some of the better numbers we've seen from him here as of late. Now, as far as scoring goes, their leader was Max Domi, who they acquired during the offseason as well for Alex Galchenyuk from the Arizona Coyotes. Domi ended up scoring 28 goals and putting up 72 points. Although when he first got started at the beginning of the year, he was on an absolute tear, and he's certainly cooled down in the second half of the year. So as much as he had a really terrific year, it'd be nice to see him produce a little bit more consistently throughout the year, that hopefully he can maintain what he did and even build upon that, because I do think it's possible that, this is the type of player Domi could be here long term, a 70 to 80 point guy if he can maintain what he did this past year. Of course, the other guy that they acquired here from Vegas, Thomas Tatar, 25 goals and 58 points. Of course, Tatar really took off as well, being a big part of the top 6. Next in line, we have Jonathan Drouin and Philip Deneau, both had 53 points. And Brendan Gallagher led the way in goals with 33 and putting up 52 points. Of course, defenseman Shea Weber had a pretty solid year as well. Of course, he missed the beginning of the season due to injury, but after he came back, he certainly performed quite nicely. Of course, this was his first year as being team captain, which he was named the captain after previous captain Max Pacioretty was traded. Now let's take a look here at their contract situation and overall salary cap situation. Now, in terms of restricted free agents, there is a few here on the roster, including Joel Armia, who they acquired last offseason from the Winnipeg Jets. Of course, this year he played in 57 games, put up 13 goals, so I'm more than sure here that he's going to be qualified and retained Of course, you got Charles Hudon, who's been inconsistent in and out of the lineup the past couple of years. It's really hard to say what Hudon's future is with this club. He very well may end up moving on. It's really hard to say, but I don't think it's a given that he gets qualified. Of course, you got Arturi Lehkonen as well. I would imagine he more likely will get a qualifying offer, and they likely will attempt to re-sign him. Of course, they have a couple defensemen that are RFAs as well this summer, including Brett Kulak and Mike Riley. Probably a fairly safe bet that they're both qualified as well. In terms of UFAs, there's not really a whole lot. Backup goaltender Antti Niemi is a pending unrestricted free agent, as well as defenseman Jordy Ben. I think it's pretty safe to say that Niemi will not be back. His season this year was not good at all. The Montreal Canadiens, that we're going to get into in the next segment here, definitely need a different backup goaltender. Jordy Ben, I think, is a good possibility they do re-sign, depending on how negotiations go. I'm sure they will at least make an attempt. I'm sure they'd have interest for sure. And as far as extensions go, there's many players that are qualified and eligible for an extension, but the main one will be Max Domi. Of course, after they acquired him last summer, he signed a short-term contract, so he's going into the final year of that deal, which pays him $3.15 million. And if he's able to put up 70 points again, that is going to be a very hefty raise leading into the year after. So they very well might try to extend him this summer and get that locked up before he gets, another solid year under his belt and can command even more money. It's hard to say, but either way, they certainly have, that's a big contract for them to look after. Now, of course, going into next year, they have 20 players under contract for $68 million tied up in cap space right now, with the salary cap expected to be around $82 to $83 million. That's going to give them, around $14 million or so dollars to play with. Of course, they get a handful of contracts that have to be looked after, so that's not too bad. They're certainly not in a cap crunch situation. They do have some money if they do want to go shopping for some free agents, and they, of course, have to qualify a few players, but none of the guys that they could qualify or bring back as UFAs are really going to be able to command a whole lot of money. So overall, their cap situation is pretty good and gives them some flexibility here moving forward to make some moves in the offseason if they feel it's the right thing to do. So as I mentioned here now, a couple key things that I think they need to look after this summer. One, they need a better backup goaltender. Now, is it going to be Charlie Lindgren? He was signed to a 3-year extension. Of course, that contract he has only pays him, I believe it was $750,000 or $775,000. So he's under contract for the next few years. I think it's fair to say he didn't have a great year in the American Hockey League this year. He's kind of been inconsistent as well. So they have him as insurance, but they also signed youngster Caden Primo, who came out of the U.S. college system. He was having a terrific collegiate career. So, I don't know if he's ready for the NHL. I wouldn't think so. Most goalies are going to need time to develop. He's only 19 years old. So it's not likely that he'd be thrust into that kind of role. So I wouldn't be shocked here or surprised if they go and sign a backup experienced goaltender on the UFA market and go with Lindgren and Primo in the minors. It is a possibility. Then again, they might go with Lindgren, see how it goes, and maybe try to acquire another goalie later in the year if it's looking like that's something they're going to need. At the same time, though, they might see what the Flyers did with Carter Hart and maybe give Primo a chance. It's really hard to say, but I would not be shocked to see Marc Bergevin lean towards the idea of signing a veteran goaltender as a backup. There's going to be enough of them on the market that have a fair bit of experience that can play, anywhere from 20 to 25 games to take the load off of Carey Price. And then they can kind of see how things go here with Lindgren and Primo and decide how the future is going to look. Now, of course, like I said, they need to address that power play. If that power play was better, then think about how much more goals they would have scored, which would have resulted in a few more wins and likely would have been the difference between them being a playoff team and not. They were 94 points. They just barely missed the playoffs as it was. If that power play was clicking at a more respectable rate of, even 19, 20%, even 18%, that's still a big enough increase to lead to enough goals to add a few more wins to the season to make them that. So obviously that's going to be a key area. Having Shea Weber in the lineup all year hopefully will certainly be a help. But they certainly need to address that power play, and we'll see how they go about doing that. Now, of course, there has been some talk as well about some potential trades that they might look to make. I know Jonathan Drouin's name's come up. He hasn't really had the greatest couple years since coming to Montreal. I think he's really feeling the pressure of playing in that city. It certainly, the fans there as well as the team demand a lot of great performances, which is rightfully so. And, he's having a hard time, I think, living up to expectations. He hasn't been terrible, but I think there's certainly more talent in there, and I think a lot of people question his effort level on some nights too. So there's a possibility that we could see Drouin moved, and if he is moved, I would strongly suggest they try to acquire a top pairing defenseman if they can to play with Shea Weber on that left side. They've got Weber, they've got Petrie. I've seen some rumblings about bringing PK Subban back to Montreal. I really don't see that happening. I mean, it could, I guess. I wouldn't rule it out, but at the same time, and based on how things went when he was traded, I just don't see it happening. Could PK Subban be traded? Absolutely. I do think it's quite a possibility this summer. Not sure Montreal is a likely destination now. But either way, a defenseman on the top pair to play that left side with Weber, I think would be a great addition to this club. We saw prospect Ryan Poehling have a terrific start to his career, putting up some big goals, including a hat trick and a shootout winner. So obviously he could be a piece to help that offensive game as well. You get Kakaniemi, who's certainly going to have another year of experience under his belt. He should hopefully get better. And of course, my only concern though is some of these guys being able to keep up what they did last year. Are guys like Max Domi, Thomas Tatar going to be able to sustain what they did this past year? Sometimes when you see players exceed their career best by a significant amount, it is quite common at times to see regression, and that is obviously a concern. But if they can kind of level out their scoring here just a little bit, then it certainly will take the pressure off them as well. Now, of course, they also have another terrific prospect in Nick Suzuki, who could possibly jump into the lineup here too. He's certainly a terrific playmaking center iceman who can also play the wing too. So they certainly have some pretty good prospect depth. They're picking number 15 overall in the draft. It's certainly debatable what kind of player they're going to get that. I do think that they're going to likely look to the defensive side here if they can grab themselves a pretty solid defenseman, but it is going to largely depend on who is on the board at the time of their choice. There's certainly going to be some interesting forward options and some interesting defensive options for them to consider here. So in my opinion, there will be some changes in Montreal, but in your opinion, I'd like to hear from you down on the comment section. How does Montreal go about addressing their backup goaltending, maybe adding a defenseman and improving that power play? What are the things they need to do, in your opinion, to make this team better and make sure they get into the playoffs next year? If you're new to the channel here, I hope you consider subscribing. We cover all 31 NHL teams, and there's plenty of content here for all hockey fans to enjoy. Stay tuned for plenty more videos in this series. Like I said, this is only number 6 of 31. Plenty more to come. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.